There's Isaac. Hi, Isaac.
Hey,
Everyone's,
hello there.
hello. Everyone's muted, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Today we've got a great opportunity to learn about strategic planning, and one of the things we talked about at PETS in Greensboro was putting together a strategic planning session for our clubs, and we're asking that all the clubs do some sort of strategic planning session. Now, at that time, we obviously didn't know that our lives were going to be transformed in this new way, and so we're going to have to become even more creative with our planning process, perhaps having something on Zoom or maybe phone calls, or I don't know if maybe you can set up some kind of conference room where you can all stay 6 feet apart or whatever it takes. But today I've got with me Paul Brandenburg, Assistant Governor Paul Brandenburg from my home club in Lenoir. And Paul has done a deep dive into the strategic plan that was created by Director Stephanie Yurchik. And well, she was the chief architect, I should say. The plan was created, and he'll go over this in greater detail, by all of the people who informed that plan. Now, we're not specifically going to discuss COVID-19 today, but I've already made mention of it. As we go into our response mode on COVID-19, and we look at our year ahead of us, there are a lot of things that could be radically different in Rotary and how we perform the magic of Rotary. And as we deal with that transformation, I want to invite you to pay attention to the strategic plan, specifically the 4 priority areas that are outlined. And with that, I'm going to bring in Assistant Governor Paul Brandenburg and let him go about explaining this strategic planning process. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Let me see here. I think is it this one? Yeah. Okay, everyone should see the strategic plan on your screen. If you don't see it, unmute yourself and let me know, or send me a message, and I'll look at. Anyway, go ahead, Paul. Tell us about this.
Thank you, Paul Brandenburg. Background: been a Rotarian about 7 or 8 years now. Past president for Lenoir. Got asked to be an AG afterwards, and life has been interesting. Born and raised in Brooklyn, but I got to North Carolina as soon as I could. Anyhow, so we'll talk a little bit here about what the Strategic Committee, Planning Committee came up with. And they worked, what we're talking about is a product of 2 years of effort at looking at the issue about developing improved strategic planning for Rotary International. And what they really found was, when we're talking about strategic, and how do we really define those overarching needs, and that it was not well defined, or as defined as clearly as it could be to go forward. But things are really changing in Rotary compared to where we were, and we really have to adapt our thinking about that. And our members really have needs and expectations, let's say, that need to be fulfilled. And what happens is when we leave them behind, or they don't get fulfilled, they leave. Now, if you look at the data, we always say, oh, 1.2 million members, 1.2 million members, year after year. But if you drill down and look at it by region or area, like North America, you discover that we've been losing about 2% of our membership per year for the last 5 years. So that's not something that says, well, we can work around that. That's a trend, and trends need to be addressed. And that's what they've done. And of course, all of this is going to be in a pre-pandemic environment, but hopefully you'll be able to get a few nuggets out, especially about the 4 new priority areas about what we're thinking and the importance of integration with the community.
Now, Paul, I want to just interject.
How about it?
Y'all, if you're able, I want you to take some notes today because you're going to want these notes, and we'll also be sharing this presentation. We'll have the recording of it available. Paul, one of the things in this, it's all guided by the vision, that vision of together we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe in our communities and in ourselves. And we have been looking at this in annual increments.
Absolutely. Yes.
But we want, RI would like to see us looking a little more cohesive over 5 years, so we can sew together those 1 year increment to create a 5-year vision.
That is in essence the mechanics of what they have envisioned, is that we normally think of ourselves on an annual slice. We get a new president, we get a new DG, we get new club presidents, and we think in 1 year slices. That's okay, but it needs to be, their problem was says we need to have it integrated and be able to address things over the longer term where there are the most strategic issues. And they define those as having better impact, better ability to reach out, engaging people more, especially engaging our communities. And more than anything else, we really got to become adaptable. And even though now that we have this pandemic in front of us, the thought about being adaptable is really cogent to what we're doing.
So we want our clubs to be the best they can be in these 4 priority areas.
That's right. And as we now, and the idea behind it is saying we're going to change the culture in Rotary to address that issue about membership leaving and making us a more effective one. But you can't do that in 1 year. You've got to do it over probably 5 years is what they're talking about being able to do. So you look at it from a 5-year standpoint, but then there'll be internal plans that we execute that incrementally move us along through the 5 years. So there'll be an annual goal or a series of annual goals for things that you want to accomplish, but those annual goals may repeat or carry forward over a longer period of time. And it's different than our current thinking has been, where, you know, especially as a past president, you got to do the pink pages, you know, and that garners your attention. But now we're really thinking, we're going to try and think longer term and in 4 new areas for us. And what we're really trying to do, when they developed this new plan, they interviewed over 1 million people in 15 countries. And it took 2 years to do it, but they've got it put together. But what they found was, even after talking to 1 million people, Rotarians and non-Rotarians, 4 things turned out to be common. And those 4 things were a sense of purpose about your community and an opportunity for providing service to community. Very important. The causes must be especially important to the member. It has to have, the organization itself needs a very good reputation and a strong heritage, and programs really must make a lot, looks a lot like Rotary. And the process that they've talked about, and what I'm following along here, is you'll find that we put all of the reference materials available in 2020 training on the district website, right up on the front page. Can't miss it. But what they're really talking about doing is using a classic approach to strategic planning, which is like going to the beach with the kids, you know. Well, where are we? Where do we want to be? Well, let's make a plan to get there. Are we there yet? So we really need to say, we got to begin to determine our status. How are we doing now? What do we want to be like? How can we achieve that vision? And then finally, how do we measure it and know whether or not we're closing in on our goals?
So how do we get started with all this? Yeah, how do we?
The key to this thing is getting the right group of people together. Can we advance a couple up to getting started? There we are.
That's how we get started.
That's how we get started. Click the button. Anyhow, key is to put together a strategic planning team. It's really more like a strategic planning committee. They're going to work on projects that will expand over multiple years, like I said, up to 5 years or so. But you've got to take it in bite-sized pieces with annual goals that enable you to move forward to where you want to be, and that will take some time. But a new kind of thinking that says one program year to the next, to the next, to the next, should be interconnected, moving towards some common goals. So what kind of people do you need?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you said something. We need to locate a non-Rotarian. What would a non-Rotarian do?
Well, one of the things is you really want to get a diverse group of people, some senior Rotarians who've seen it all. You want to get some new ones on who have the high expectations that we want to be able to fulfill. We have skills and background that we want to bring together. So, but the non-Rotarian could be a person who will look at it through a completely neutral set of eyes. So you don't have one side or the other as you do brainstorming sessions as you might need to put this together. So you could look at perhaps someone talk to either Chamber of Commerce, find or to get a recommendation for a community business leader who has to also put together strategic plans for their businesses that could advise and counsel it. I have a friend who's a PhD instructor up at App State in government affairs, and one of his sub-courses is in fact strategic planning.
Yeah, and we're not ready to
He
show
would
it
be
yet.
on my list of what a facilitator would be
Ready
like.
to go on in 3 apartments.
Is it a 2-bedroom?
Yes.
If you accept Section 8?
No, ma'am.
All right. Thank
Sorry.
you so much. Bye-bye.
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay. Anyhow, we want this team to get together, and they should plan to work together, but you'll probably have project teams that will evolve out of this thing. Their North Star, though, regardless, is going to be the Rotary Vision Statement. So, let's see.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So some of the clubs that I'm working with are very small clubs.
Yes.
And when the very first step that you have says assemble a strategic planning team. Well, their club, past, present, and incoming leaders is the whole club. Some clubs that we have right now, if you go and attend their meetings, more people have past president badges than other, it's incredible. It's sad actually, because there's so few new members, but I love, that's my background, strategic planning for growth and development with nonprofit organizations. But I'm wondering how I can encourage some of these smaller clubs to take this on when basically it looks like something that the whole club will be doing.
I think you can scale it for the club, pick one area, work on it, teach yourselves how to do it. Because clearly what I'm talking about is much more aligned with larger clubs than it is with a small club. So I would say the best thing to do is to pick one of these priorities and say, we're going to work on this priority, maybe 2 of them for our small group. Because one of the key things that they were talking about was it's the integration into the community, working with other people in your community so you can help them and that they can help you, and maybe you get some new members out of it. So let them, I would say, focus on community-related activities and how to put it together, and look at what goals or you might want to achieve over the next few years, probably to either, I would say, engage with your community members would be of the priorities, probably the one that talks about engaging. If you can't do it all, it's better to do something than to do nothing. And it's small clubs, if they satisfy their membership, they're doing great.
Mm-hmm. So
anyhow, that's.
Hey,
David.
can I ask a question? Because I'm sorry, I don't know if I blacked out or what, but could you guys go over one more time very clearly, 1, 2, 3, 4, what are the priorities?
We're going to get to that.
It's coming up on the
It's
next
coming
slide.
up on the next slide. Well,
Let's go to the next
yes,
slide.
sir.
Great question. Thank you for the transition. All right, here is what came out of the Strategic Planning Committee. It all hinges and starts with the Rotary vision. That's kind of the North Star that guides all the effort. But to improve the output and to be able to deal with 4 particular areas that came out as a result of their research, out of interviewing 1 million people and trying to tie it all together. How should we address this over the next 5 years? And so they had 4. First one is increase the impact. Of course, Rotary remains the legacy. It really is our legacy program. And so we want to finish that off. And that gives what a friend of mine said, the general officer said, you got to have bragging rights. So it helps produce those bragging rights for you. It might spawn off some other new ideas in terms of offerings. But I would say increasing impact, especially if you're a small one, being able to time with your community, I think you can do some things in that area. The second thing is we should look at expanding our reach in terms of diversity and participation. A club of all lawyers probably would be an interesting environment, but different. And create some new channels into Rotary. When I first came into Rotary, there was the issue of satellite clubs. Holy mackerel, at Lenore, satellite club was going to be the end of our history. And it's turned out to be one of the best decisions that we have ever made. So the idea of finding new ways to expand our reach really does apply. Increasing our openness and build awareness of the impact that we're having and our brand. Now, in terms of engagement, engaging third priority, engaging the members is really important. And I've seen even where you bring a new member on and you don't get them promptly engaged, they fall away to the wayside because of that. But it's also important in terms of engagement. And one of the themes that came out of this thing was Rotary clubs really need to engage with their communities in a two-way environment so that Rotary can provide some help or assistance or projects or work that will facilitate improving the quality of life of the community. And the community comes back and feedback and supports the club. So community involvement in terms of engagement is really, really important. And then finally, adaptability. Now you're gonna like this one. If you look down to the second line in adaptability, streamline Rotary's governance, structure, and processes. I spent 30 years in the United States military, and I will tell you, we had nothing on the Rotary procedures and rules that were established. And I was in the bomb business, so we had all kinds of extra special rules. But increase our ability to be adaptable. Those are all things that will help shift our culture in a direction that brings members in and gives us the opportunity to do service in our community.
So this is like, we have our 4-way test of ethics and all that we think, say, and do. This is the 4-way test of strategy. And we want our 4-way test of our vision. And we think we not all of our activities are going to increase impact. Not all of them are going to make us more adaptable. But each activity we do will, in theory, increase or expand reach or enhance engagement. It'll touch at least one of these areas. And then it may touch multiple areas. And at the end of all this planning, this should all fit together so that we have a real plan. It's not a checklist. It's more of a way of thinking. And we're really changing the way we think, and we're changing the way that we create our activities and our engagement points with our community. We're changing the way we critically think. So when we have someone come to our boards and say, hey, we'd really like to do this new type of fundraiser, then the board looks at it and says, well, how will that expand our reach? How will that increase our impact? How will that enhance engagement? How will that increase our adaptability? So that we're really getting people to start thinking like this and not just checking boxes. So what do we do to get started here?
Okay, we go to the next page. Phase one, determine your status. So how are we doing? The first thing to look at is what are the concerns that you have that really are going to decide to drive your need to be able to accomplish this? For example, will you actually go about getting more community members involved, or how would you get the club more deeply engaged in community activities? But find the big ticket items that could affect the long-term health of your club. And then you begin to look at your strengths and weaknesses. You will find in the district website on the 2020 training material that Rotary has numerous, at least a half a dozen, different tools available to clubs where you can do your own self-assessment, kind of like having a silent consultant on the team. The first one that I looked at that is useful is called the Rotary Club Health Check. And it's a series of questions that you can assess your group that you've put together. They don't have to invent the wheel. The wheel is already here. You can run this checklist and think about, well, how are we doing in these areas? And it comes with a set of diagnostic tools at the back end. That said, hey, if your club is really losing members, or if some other things are not right that you can identify, this will help you do it. And it gives you the checklist and say, here's what people have tried if they also had this problem. Because almost every problem you can possibly have is some club somewhere is probably already done it. So they're there for, there's another one in there called the membership survey. It's a series of questions, anonymous questions, about what do the club members think about your program, how they're being executed, and you can actually get them. So you can go through that and score it. And at the back end, the part that I was dreaded the most, but also appreciated sometimes, is there's a blank page back there that says, tell us what you really think. And some people will really do that, and it helps change and address the program.
So to get started, you want to survey your members. You want to do this Rotary Club health check. You should ask your community, what do they think about Rotary? Get some feedback, get some information from outside of your organization and inside the organization. But the key is getting the data. You've got to get the data.
You got to get some data, because then you can look at, once you have the data, and say, wow, here's an opportunity we haven't done anything with. Mm-hmm. We ought to be able to pursue that, and our club can act on it because we understand what the opportunity is. Or we can begin to look at what challenges your community has. Certainly from the paradigm we have, what do we do with the kids who are losing to school? What do we do about feeding them? Those kinds of things. How do we begin to deal with the challenges and opportunities that we're before?
And so then once you've got you've identified the SWOT analysis, if you will, and you've really gotten the data, then it's like, okay, here's where we are. Where do we want to be? All right, so I'm starting to think, where does my club want to be in 2025?
And that's part of what your strategic, what your vision statement is all about. I think that's coming up next. Yes. That's exactly right. And I want to thank you, Mr. DG, for a transition on my slide.
Yes.
It's always greatly appreciated. But what you really want to do is be able to define those opportunities and challenges that before. Become aware of them. And that's why we put those tools in the website for you. Now, phase two, we're up there on the screen. What do you want the club to be like? I mean, is everything wonderful? Probably not. So can you identify 5 to 7 things, characteristics you want your club to have over the next 3 to 5 years? You don't change it overnight, but you work on it and incrementally move through it year by year on an annual basis. But at that same time, over those 3, 4, 5 years, you're moving into the direction of the 4 priorities. So you keep an eye on the priorities while you move forward implementing your plan. So what do you really want to achieve in the next 5 years? And then the interesting thing was to come back and find out, how do you know that you've actually succeeded? Mm-hmm. And that's part of what you're measuring. tools are going to be for putting it in place. So what goes in place? You got to make a plan. And that plan should address your strategic priorities, just as David explained that the 4 impact areas are there, but it's like how to eat an elephant. You know, you do it one bite at a time. You don't try to do them at all, but you have annual slices with goals inside of each one of those annual areas. And you can relate those annual areas to the impact area, and you can begin to build this mosaic of here's where we are, here's where we're going, here's how we're affecting what Rotary needs to have done to change the culture of Rotary and bring it around. And it really comes down to really thinking in 2 parts. Longer term strategic priorities that are going to move you where you want to be. And then along with that, the annual goals that get you there. So it's pretty straight. It sounds more complex than it really is. It's my personal opinion, but that's it. And then finally, once you've got this thing going, and you want to find out, are we there yet? So you need a way to monitor your plan. You have to develop some measures that go along with those annual goals that you've established. You want to talk to your club and give them some feedback about how it's going. It's interesting if you have a very small organization, then everybody's kind of did it together. But if you're one of the bigger ones with 100 or more people in there, only a few will be aware, but you want to get them tied in and let go forward.
So you could use like a club assembly or a special meeting or even just a board meeting, something you need to report where we are. And we've got some tools for that too. I'm going to cover here in a few minutes to show you.
And part of which is what you're developing is not going to come down from a mountain on a tablet. And one of my favorite quotes from going to a war college is that is from Field Marshal Ferdinand von Moltke, the elder, not the son, but the elder. He's probably one of the greatest military leaders of all time in terms of clearly the theorist behind modern warfare. But his one thing said was more than anything else, he said, no plan will survive contact with the enemy. So what you develop may not be what you expected. It may not be scratching your itch the way you want to go. If it needs to be changed, change it. But let people know why you changed and how you're going to go about it. But don't get locked into saying, I got to blindly pursue this because you may need to maneuver a little bit differently, or you may not have defined the problem well to begin with. So I tip of the hat to Field Marshal von Moltke. Anyhow, it's build the best plan you can, but be prepared to change it if you need. And that takes me down to our new Rotary president, who's Rotary opens opportunities, the open door. Anyhow, my line on the bottom of that, if you've got a plan underway and you're beginning to really know the inner workings of your club and how you can develop it, that when you get to step through one of those doors, you say, I know how to deal with this.
I know how I got here.
I know how I got here, so that's it.
Yeah, so just to rehash, there's this four process or the process overview. You find out where you are, collect some data, you develop the vision, where you want to be, you make a plan to get there, and then you track your progress. And you do that within the 4 priority areas of increasing impact, expanding reach, increasing participant engagement, and increasing our ability to adapt. And those are the overarching goals. Now I'm going to show you the tool. If you go to our district website, and you don't have to do this now because I'm going to do it for you.
You're going to get the real thing.
Yeah.
I will tell you, as I built this thing, what David is going to show you is, in fact,
all of the documents.
The guide is what he's going to bring up and show you. And what's in these slides is really quite faithful back to that strategic planning guide, which is a brochure. And it's structured that way that if you're bringing some people on, you want to explain the process and what's going on. This briefing was designed to help with that. It does seem really complicated at the beginning, but we're just at the beginning of embarking on a way to change the culture of Rotary for the long term.
So
here it
here's your guide. Now this guide, this is the long version of what we just covered in the PowerPoint. So you can use this guide to guide your club and the strategic process. Here's the vision, the process overview, which we covered, how to get started, doing the data collection. Here's where you can enter the data.
I'm not seeing it on my screen.
I'm not either.
Nobody seeing this?
Oh, you
No.
know, if you did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it'd be great if you could see it. Let me see. Let me see.
And what it does is it really, it traces
Sorry.
the briefing, but it makes
Here it is.
the slides at the end are the
I
best.
think this is it.
The pages at
This
the
is
end.
it.
We can get to that.
Share. Okay. Is that it?
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
And 4.
Do over. All right. Thank you for telling me. So, this is the guide. There it is, the vision statement, the process overview, how you get started, data collection, putting your issues in here, putting your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and challenges, developing your vision, where you want to see your club in 5 years, club vision statement, okay, making the plan, identifying your priorities and your annual goals. Now this is critical here. This looks a little,
This is where it all comes together. This part here is
it really, this part, it confused me at first because this form looks so similar to the next form. But this one, you put your strategic priorities, the impact, engage, reach, and adapt. And then you look at your annual goals. And you guys already have goals for your year. I mean, you're already thinking about these goals for your year. You put your annual goals in there. You look at the actions that are going to be needed, the resources. Who's going to help you do that? And then when is it going to get done? And you go through and you put all those in there. And then you track your progress. So you look at how similar this form looks. It's the same thing, except you got all the priorities in there, and then you got your goals, but then it's met or unmet, reason for unmet goals, adjustment to action plan. And so then at the end of the year, so fast forward to next year in May or April or whatever, and you're having your strategic planning session for 2021, 22. And you're going to present this to your strategic planning committee next year and pass the torch to the next president and say, look, I've done this much work towards the 5-year plan. This is where we are. And now we have to figure out where we want to go this year. And so you're helping them move along. You're actually moving the needle that way. And it's a more, there's power in continuity. And so if we have this continuous process over the next 5 years, I really believe we're going to move the needle. We're going to make a profound change in Rotary it's not a change that everyone's telling you to change. It's a change that your community is demanding, and it's specific to your club. So it's not something that big Rotary is telling you to do. It's what you're telling your club, what your club is saying they need and what they want to be. So I think that's a critical way to look at this. And now we have some time. We've got about, I wanted to end around a 1/4 till, but we're at 20 minutes till 5 o'clock. I do want to have some time now for questions and discussion. So please be respectful of one another and don't step on each other verbally, but just, go ahead and unmute if you want, or you can raise your hand and I can address you.
Now, I have to say also thank you to those who have come today, because looking down and saying, oh, going to a briefing on strategic planning guide. That would not be high on my list. So I want to thank you all for, especially before we get into the question part, to appreciate that.
This is Michael. I have a question.
Shoot.
Okay.
It would be a perfect world in a sense if all of our clubs had blank slates upon which to apply the strategic planning guide. Certainly and obviously we don't. So what I'm looking for is anybody's tip for wisdom related to how you might transition from kind of the expectation in club members right now that, well, this is what we've done for years past, and this is what we've established, and these are our mandates going forward, because this is what we've always done, to in this new way of thinking and behaving. Thank you.
So I would start by saying that you can certainly stay with the status quo. The only thing we're asking them to do is to apply these 4 priority concerns. So let's say that, well, we've always done the auction and we want to do the auction this year. We're going to do the auction because we do the auction every year, and by God, we're going to do the auction this year. Well, that's good. Let's do the auction. Let's think about it. How does the auction increase our impact? How does the auction increase our engagement and our participant engagement? How does the auction expand our reach? How does the auction increase our ability to adapt? And that's the purpose of it, is to have that conversation. It's not necessarily to change what you've always done that's working, or it's more or less to get you to have that conversation with your club so that they are able to look at it through this new lens. Anything else, Paul?
I think that's great.
Okay, thank you.
David,
Okay, Connie was next. Go ahead, Connie.
Yeah. I was just, with this virus and everything and the quarantining and not knowing what's going to be, what our world's going to look like in the next month or it's 6 months. When would you recommend that we start doing these meetings? Because we have no idea what it's going to look like.
That's a fair question. It's something that Paul and I were discussing before we got on this call. I think you're going to have to do this virtually. You're probably going to have to get on the phone with people. You're going to have to maybe have a small Zoom meeting. You're gonna have to feel your way around on that. Paul, would you have some other guidance on that? What would you suggest?
I think you're pretty close. I mean, I agree. I mean, that's it's doing something is probably better than doing nothing. So you could take the front end of this, as we saw down, especially if it's a smaller group of stuff, and begin to think about the particular issues without necessarily having to come up with a plan for everything, but to say, do we understand who we are as a club, and do we understand how we can affect our community with these priorities and how they fit together, without necessarily doing a whole big plan. You don't have to change everything if this is not the time to do it, because the environment is very much different than what the people who developed this concept. They had no foreknowledge that we'd be struggling through this thing. But I would say
you could do data collection.
You could get some
you
data.
You could send out some emails and get some survey data out there to your club. You could certainly do the Rotary Club health check as a president-elect. You can do that part, and then you can probably either have a virtual meeting or some phone calls and try to hash this out a little bit. At least get your action plan down to where you've put these things in there and you've thought through it, so that when we do get together, you can. And
it's part of the idea, I guess, about when eventually we roll out of the pandemic. Now what will be the question?
Yeah.
And so part of this thinking that David's talking about doing, if you're thinking internally within the club, you might, some of what you're addressing will be necessary or beneficial when we finally roll out of this thing and we get to a new normal, whatever that is.
So as president-elect, then I should be pulling this team together in the next several weeks before my year starts. Then is what you're
Yes.
saying. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
May I
And
say something, David?
I'm sorry?
May I say something?
Yes, please, Sophia.
So I think that with the strategic planning, you really have to be thinking in very general terms and not specific terms. And so if you're thinking generally, it doesn't matter if you're meeting in person or meeting virtually, or, you know, change the way you're meeting in one way or another. You still have some very general goals that you're going to be working towards. And it helps to really put you in a mindset, and also remind your members that Rotary's not sleeping. You know, there's still stuff going on, and we're still thinking, the problems are still the same, and we're still addressing them in any way we can. But just thinking about them all in really, really broad terms. I was just taking a look at, I mean, we update our strategic plan every year. I think our first one was in 2011. It was updated in 2014. And then in 2018 and 2019, I was the person who was taking a look at it. And I just noticed, you know, what we'd written in 2019, and they make just as much sense now as they did when we first came up with them, probably in a different way. You know,
Right.
we had to define, where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years? And what steps are we going to take to accomplish them? And who's going to be responsible for those steps? Let's check back in 6 months and see what we've done, or what we still need to do, or how we might change our approach. But thinking about things in very general terms will help.
Yes, and you can do that along with that in the 4 priority areas. You can get a sense of, well, what is the impact of this on our community, or
And can I just add that I think that in this time when not all clubs are meeting with meetings, I mean, they're having meetings, but they're virtually, but they're not necessarily having programs as much. What a great time to engage the club in this process as we're planning for the future, and give a focus to that 40-minute Zoom meeting, or however long they're able to have it, so that they come out of this time with something besides just a check-in with each other, which some clubs are doing, and that's great. They're checking in and figuring out where they can help in the community. Some that I'm working with, but some I'm not sure even that they're meeting. But what a good use of time to come out of this with a product in hand for when at least a guidebook. So anyway, that's just a thought. But
Thank you, Donna. That's a great point. And what we've done with these documents today is, and with these documents that are in the training library under your club strategic planning, is that we've provided you with a bibliography that you can share, so that if you want to do a club program on Zoom, you can utilize the same slides that we used, or you can use them to make your own slides, and you can make that presentation. So that the point of this today was to really inform you that the tools were there for you, so that you can make a strategic plan for your club, and then you can empower your club to make that plan. So the tools are there, and you know, the presentation framework is here for you. So you want to make this, like Donna's saying, make the pitch, or have that discussion, or open up, just having a general discussion around those 4 impact, or those 4 priorities. That would be a great discussion for 4 weeks. You could have Rotary meetings. Like today, we're going to discuss how we're going to increase impact. You know, it just would be it'd be a good way. There'd be a lot of creative ways that you could use these tools.
and that kind of thinking goes well for small clubs in particular.
Mm-hmm.
It would facilitate knitting the club together and everybody's on the same page. You can still continue with your regular programs. This way, but you develop a little broader understanding of how it fits into Rotary and how it will benefit you in the long run.
David, could I make a self-serving statement?
Please.
I encourage the president-elects to involve their present nominees in a big
Yeah,
way.
absolutely.
Otherwise, you have a very successful thing that dies on June 30th of next year. The
Amen.
best chance for continuity is to get them in there helping you build it. And it's somebody who ought to be engaged with you and ought to be interested. So I encourage you to please involve your present nominees.
Great advice, Ken. You definitely want to have that leadership chain involved. You know, it wouldn't hurt to have the immediate past in there so that you've got a view of the past, the present, and the future. And, you know, because everybody's, you know, and then you need like a club member at large, and then a not officer, and then this non-Rotarian, if you can find it. You know, not everybody's going to have all of the different pieces, but like Ken's saying, you know, having some critical pieces like your president nominee in there, and
Yes.
and having a strategic planning person, somebody with a strategic mind and thinking, that would be very useful.
You know, and especially like as the president elect nominee and stuff, even if you go on to pets, you still don't know what you don't know. So developing this kind of dialogue and understanding about how the club operates could be very beneficial, not from filling in and checking squares, but understanding the concepts of what made the club successful.
Okay, go ahead, Connie.
So my last question is, do clubs typically pay someone to do that facilitation that you recommended having somebody outside, or is that usually you find it pro bono?
That would be a pro bono.
Yeah, I'd say pro bono. I would just say free.
May cost you lunch.
Free.
Free. We'll give you a hamburger, and we'll ask you to join our club.
There you go. I just didn't know what the.
I'm thinking of Isaac with membership growth. I can hear him laughing even though he's muted. So everyone, I'm really glad to see all your faces, and I'm so happy that we were able to get together today. If you have more questions about this, we are happy to answer them, and you can send me an email, you can give me a phone call. Happy to work with you on this and help you out through the process. The tools are available. You can go on the district's website, rotary7670.org. They're under the training library, and it's at the bottom of the library. You'll see the strategic planning tools. And with that, is there anything else, Paul? No?
Well, feel free also to send me an email or call, or I have a Zoom account also. The Lenore account is under my name, so be glad to Zoom in if you like.
I'm so happy that you guys were able to be here today. There'll also be some other trainings available. Billy Black's offering additional trainings. We got the district Zoom meetings that are going on. I hope everybody's staying well connected during this difficult time, and please be safe and be well, and God bless you and all your families.
Thank you both.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and thank you for signing up for a program. The title is, We're going to Study the Strategic Planning Guy.